2 hours ago, the question that was always at the center of this war finally received an answer from Trump's own intelligence chief under oath before the U.S. Senate. Was Iran an imminent nuclear threat when the United States launched Operation Epic Fury on February 28th? Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard declined to say yes. She declined to say no. She declined several times, according to Bloomberg, to confirm the White House's core justification for starting a war that has now killed more than 2,000 people across the Middle East, shut down the world's most critical oil shipping lane, and sent U.S. gas prices to levels not seen since the COVID pandemic. But what she could not avoid saying, because it was already in her written testimony, already submitted to the committee, already on the record, was this: Iran's nuclear enrichment program was obliterated by the last summer's strikes. And since those strikes, the intelligence community assessed that Iran had made no effort to rebuild that enrichment capability. Trump, on March 4th, told congressional leaders if we didn't hit within 2 weeks, they would have had a nuclear weapon. The head of the International Atomic Energy Agency said on March 3rd that the watchdog had no evidence of Iran building a nuclear bomb. Gabbard's own written testimony said the enrichment program was obliterated and not being rebuilt. The war began on February 28th. These facts do not fit together. And on Wednesday, March 18th, a Senate hearing forced that contradiction into the public record, with the nation's top intelligence official sitting at the witness table, unable to reconcile them. The passage she omitted, and the senator who noticed the specific mechanics of what happened at the hearing matter because they reveal a deliberate choice, not an oversight. Gabbard submitted written testimony to the Senate Intelligence Committee before the hearing. That written testimony contained a key passage. As a result of Operation Midnight Hammer, the June 2025 U.S. strikes on Iran's nuclear facilities, Iran's nuclear enrichment program was obliterated. The written testimony further stated that Iran had not attempted to rebuild its enrichment capability in the months that followed. When Gabbard delivered her opening statement verbally, she skipped that passage entirely. Senator Mark Warner, the committee's vice chairman, noticed immediately. He asked Gabbard directly why she had omitted those sections from her spoken remarks. Her explanation: "I recognized that time was running long, and I skipped through some of the portions." Warner's response was direct. "So, you chose to omit the parts that contradict the president." Gabbard did not dispute the characterization. She did not identify any other portions she had skipped for time. The specific omission was the passage that directly undercut the White House's stated rationale for going to war. As Senator John Ossoff then asked the follow-up question that defined the hearing: was it the assessment of the intelligence community that there was an imminent nuclear threat posed by the Iranian regime? Gabbard's response has already been quoted in every major outlet covering the war. It is not the intelligence community's responsibility to determine what is and is not an imminent threat. The only person who can determine that is the president. Ossoff pushed back with precision. "It is precisely your responsibility. This is the worldwide threats hearing. You are here to represent the IC's assessment of threats. You are evading the question because to provide a candid answer would contradict a statement from the White House. The legal and constitutional weight of the word imminent is not abstract. It is the specific threshold that determines whether a president can commit U.S. military forces to combat without a congressional declaration of war. Under U.S. domestic law and the War Powers Resolution, a president can order military action without congressional authorization only in cases of immediate self-defense, when the threat is imminent enough that waiting for congressional approval would itself cause harm. Trump did not seek congressional authorization before launching Operation Epic Fury. The legal basis for the war rests on the imminent threat claim. Under international law, the same standard applies. A preemptive strike on a sovereign nation requires a threat that is imminent, certain, and unavoidable through other means. To the ongoing nuclear negotiations, which Oman's foreign minister described as producing a breakthrough on February 27th, the day before the strikes began, directly challenged the unavoidable through other means element. Iran had agreed, according to Oman, to never stockpile enriched uranium and to accept full IAEA verification. Talks were scheduled to resume March 2nd. The strikes began February 28th. Joe Kent, the director of the National Counterterrorism Center, who resigned on March 18th in protest of the war, stated in his public resignation letter, "Iran posed no imminent threat to our nation." He was Gabbard's subordinate, a Trump appointee, a former Green Beret, a man who left the Democratic Party and supported Trump specifically because of his stated opposition to Middle Eastern military entanglements. When a president's own hand-picked counterterrorism director resigns, the day before his hand-picked intelligence director testifies to Congress, and both effectively reach the same conclusion about the legal basis for the war, the word imminent has stopped being a legal technicality and started being the central political fact of the conflict. Gabbard's testimony produced a second contradiction that has received less attention but carries equal weight. Trump told reporters and congressional leaders throughout the first weeks of the war that Iranian forces had been literally obliterated. On March 9th, he said Iran had no Navy, Air Force, anti-aircraft equipment. It's all been blown up. The military framing has been consistent, decisive, overwhelming, essentially complete. And Gabbard told the Senate on March 18th that the Iranian regime appears to be intact but largely degraded. She warned that if a hostile regime survives, it will likely seek to begin a years-long effort to rebuild its military, missiles, and UAV force. She acknowledged that Iran and its proxies remain capable of and continue to attack U.S. and allied interests in the Middle East. The regime is intact. Iran's proxies are still attacking. The Strait of Hormuz is still closed on day 21. Oil is above $110 a barrel. Goldman Sachs has warned prices may stay above $100 through 2027. Senator Warner told Military.com that Trump has no concrete plan or objective for the military campaign and that American lives are at risk. These are not partisan talking points. They are the intelligence community's own assessments, and delivered under oath by Trump's own appointee, that contradict the president's public characterization of the war's progress, the war's justification, and the war's trajectory simultaneously. Gabbard also declined to answer whether she had briefed Trump on the intelligence community's long-standing assessment that Iran would likely close the Strait of Hormuz in response to military strikes. "I have not and won't divulge internal conversations," she told Senator Warner. She acknowledged, when pressed, that it had indeed been long an assessment of the IC that Iran would likely hold the strait as leverage. The strait is now closed. The question of whether the president was warned and proceeded anyway has not been answered publicly. As what makes this moment structurally significant is not simply that a senior official contradicted the president. That happens. What is significant is where it happened, how it happened, and what it means for everything that comes next. It happened at the Senate Intelligence Committee's annual Worldwide Threats hearing, the most formal, most public, most legally consequential venue in which intelligence officials testify. The written testimony is permanently part of the congressional record. The verbal exchanges are on camera. Senators Ossoff, Warner, and Wyden asked specific, precise questions and received specific, precise non-answers that are themselves revealing. The IAEA found no evidence Iran was building a nuclear bomb before the war. Iran's enrichment program was already obliterated by last summer's strikes, per Gabbard's own written assessment. Iran had agreed to IAEA verification the day before the strikes began. Per Oman, the NCTC director resigned, saying Iran posed no imminent threat. The DNI declined under oath to confirm the imminent threat claim. The legal basis for the most expensive and most geopolitically consequential U.S. military action since the Iraq invasion is now publicly, formally, and permanently in question, recorded in the congressional record on day 18 of a war that is showing no signs of ending. The war began because Trump said Iran would have had a nuclear weapon in 2 weeks. His own intelligence director's written testimony said the nuclear program was obliterated months earlier and not being rebuilt. The gap between those two statements is not a communications failure. It is not a timing issue. And it is the core question of whether the American people, the U.S. Congress, and international law were given an accurate account of why this war began. 2 hours ago, that question does not have a clean answer. What it has is a Senate hearing transcript, a written testimony that was selectively read aloud, a resigned counterterrorism director, and a DNI who told senators that determining what is and is not an imminent threat is not her responsibility. In a war already costing $1 billion a day and reshaping the global energy order, that answer may prove to be the most consequential thing spoken in Washington since the first bombs fell on Tehran.